Mrs. Slum?
Dr. Cordino?
Here.
Mr. Daughtry?
Here.
Mrs. Fano?
Oh, here.
Dr. Modrak?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. Rappaport?
Here.
Ms. Zuckerman?
Here.
Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Graff?
Here. Flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Don't sign off.
New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provision of the Act, the Montville Township Board of Education provided a notice of this meeting, which included the time, date, and location that was posted at the Montville Township Municipal Building, all Montville Public Schools, the Montville Public Library, the Montville Township Board of Education Administrative Office Building, the district website, and advertised in the Daily Record, the board's official newspaper, on February 22nd, 2020.
Thank you, Christine. As we all know, the purpose of this meeting is the presentation of the tentative budget, which will then be submitted to the county superintendent, and the public hearing and adoption of the final budget for 2021 will be done on April 28th, correct?
Correct.
At this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Karen, who is chairman of the finance committee, and she might say a few words before introducing the team.
Thank you, Charlie. Can everyone in the audience hear me?
My phone will up.
As Chair of Finance, I want to thank the team and her staff for another organized and thorough budget development process. I'd like to emphasize that the budget being presented tonight is a tentative budget. On March 20th, the budget will be submitted to the county superintendent. On April 28th, there will be a public hearing on the budget. And between now and then, we will have 2 regular board meetings at which the team will present more, although perhaps abbreviated, budget presentations. For the audience and my colleagues, this is a zero-based budget, meaning no line item amount was automatically transferred from one budget to another. So no line item was just sort of copied and pasted. Every line item was examined and justified. The budget Mrs. Slunt will present tonight is efficient and effective. It allows us to advance our mission, our goals, and our strategic plan while taking advantage of numerous shared services and purchasing agreements which Mrs. Slunt has provided me, and I'd be happy to share. So therefore, it is my pleasure now to ask Mrs. Slunt to begin her budget presentation.
Thank you, Karen. Christine?
Okay, so this is a little different than the way we've done this since I've been here. What we're going to do is we are actually going to go through the process that Finance and Facilities has already been through. So the walking through of the different sections, the discussions that we're going to have tonight are the same type of discussions that we had when Finance and Facilities reviewed it. The state of New Jersey dictates a lot of the formatting of the budget. They indicate that it has to be a balanced budget, meaning for us to have appropriations that we intend to spend, there have to be sources that we can get the money from in order to fund it. The state of New Jersey organizes the budget according to areas, and those areas are basically taking all the transactions, all the events that occur in an entire year, converting those into financial transactions, and then grouping them into like type of transactions. Those like type of transactions are then, we then categorize even more and unify them into the instructional areas, the student support service areas, administration, and then the area of operations and capital improvements. So what we're going to do is we are going to go through those various areas. Now, when we present on the budget, we actually present on 3 different funds. They are 3 of the 4 governmental funds that actually are presented every month to you on the financial statements. the general fund, which is the area that we're going to spend the most amount of our time on. That's the area that's substantially supported by taxes. The special revenue fund, which relates to grants and monies that we receive from the federal government. And then debt service, the amount of money that's put aside in order for us to then pay off debt that we've incurred in previous years. So we're going to go through all those different areas, but that kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking at, considering the fact that you're seeing a lot of this come out through the year. Actually, the budget roll out into actual as you approve those financial reports every month.
Before the team starts, I think it might be best if we let her finish her presentation. If you have questions in the meantime, write them down, circle the page or whatever the heck it is. Because sometimes your questions might be answered when she gets to a later item in the presentation. So if you can do that, we'll now enable her to get through it, and then we can answer any questions that you may have. Okay?
So when you look through your book, you'll notice that there are gaps in pages. That's because there are backup pages that actually support the information that's on each of the pages. What we are going to do, though, is we are going to go through each page and we're going to have discussions on each of the different types of items included on that page. I'd like you to turn to page 6, which on the top should say expenditures for the year 2021. What you notice on this page is those 4 areas that I just described. Pink is instructional, yellow is student support services, the darker blue is administration, and the green is the area of operations and capital improvements. On the bottom, you have special revenue. So those first big grouping is your general fund. Special revenue is your grants and your monies given to us from other organizations. And then the last line on the very, very bottom is debt service. So what we are going to do is we're going to go through and look at the instructional area. The instructional area covers about half of the budget. So we're going to go and delve into what half of the budget looks like. These costs are costs that relate to what is going on directly in the classrooms. Those may be classrooms within our district. Those could also be classrooms out of our district for students who are being placed out due to their special needs. If you turn to page 7, we're going to look at the first area in that instructional area. And that area is regular programs. That's the events that are occurring in the classrooms for regular education programs, representing about 60% of that total instructional number. And in this area includes your teachers that are teaching the students, the supplies that they're using, the textbooks that they're using, the technology that they're using. If we have leased items for their use, those costs are in there. So the idea of this area is all the costs for all of the events that occur in a district throughout the year that relate to what happens in a regular classroom. That's what's included in this area. So if we start on the very first line, which is preschool teachers, we have 2 different types of preschool programs. We have a preschool inclusion program in which we have regular students who are with special needs students to make up a classroom. That is this group. We will look at a different preschool program as we look at special ed in a few minutes. So we have 2 classrooms in the district that do preschool programs. One is at Valley View and the other one is at Cedar Hill. And the teachers and the staff that help work with those students are included on that line. What you will notice a lot of times with salary lines is they are driven by who the people are who are part of that group of individuals who meet the criteria of the definition and where they sit on the guide. If you're up at the very, very top of the guide, your increase is not 3%. It's actually less than 3% because of the way the guide works. That additional step only adds a small amount at the top of the guide. If you're in the middle of the guide, you may find that the increase is actually greater than 3%. And again, it's all driven by how the guide is created, who the individuals are, and where they sit. So we'll see variances as we walk through tonight And those variances are generally related to who is in that grouping and where they happen to fall on the guide. So in the case of our preschool teachers, they happen to fall more in the middle of the guide, and so the increase is a little higher than the 3%. The next line, kindergarten teachers, again, these are the teachers that are working with the kindergarten students in the 5 elementary schools. We have a reduction of 1 kindergarten teacher. All of the teaching staff adjustments are based on enrollment. So we take where we are right now, we roll everybody forward, and we begin to project out where we believe the classrooms will be as we are here in September of next year. If we find that we are going to have enough students in an area, in a building, that would require additional teaching, meaning to split a class, then we add a staff member. If we end up in a situation where we believe that the enrollment is going to be lower than what we have right now, then we eliminate a teacher. And it could change from building to building, and it can change within a building between grade levels. So based on our projections, we expect that we're going to have the elimination of 1 kindergarten teacher at Woodmont due to enrollment. In grades 1 through 5, which would be the rest of your teachers in your 5 elementary schools who are teaching regular ed, you have an increase of the collective bargaining increase. Plus we are adding 2 teachers in that range of grades 1 through 5, 1 at Woodmont, which is a 1st grade teacher, and 1 at Cedar Hill, which is a 3rd grade teacher, which is making up most of that increase. Grade 6 to 8 is Lazar. These would be your regular education teachers at Lazar. And again, you see an increase a little bit higher than the 3%, and again, that's based on where the teachers are falling on the guide. And then 9 to 12, which is the high school. And that increase, again, is a little bit higher than the 3% based on where the teachers are falling. Inclusive in this area is home instruction. Home instruction is a situation when a student is not able to come to school due to a long-term medical illness, and we send staff out to them to assist them at home. And those amounts are included for teachers' stipends that go out to pay them for that extra time. We do contract home instructors due to our own staff not being able to meet all the needs within the district. And then we provide them with some money for supplies that they need to bring with them. Other staff members relates to the kindergarten aides that are assigned to each kindergarten class at the 5 elementary schools. And we do have, just like we had a reduction of 1 kindergarten teacher, the related aide is being eliminated as well. So they kind of go as pairs. It's usually, it's a teacher and an aide, teacher and an aide. So when we reduce, for enrollment reasons, a teacher, the corresponding aide would go as well. Educational services relates to presentations that are done for the population. These would be your assemblies, particularly down at the elementary schools. And we have included additional funds in that line in order to provide some new programming that we had not included before. These are programs such as the things like, not necessarily the DAC funded programs, but things like the STEAM program. We're having a STEAM day on Friday. That particular program gets funded through presentations, and if there aren't PTAs or someone else to help fund those, then we're funding them ourselves. So we put additional monies aside for those types of programs. Those are for the entire building, and we pay the presenters to come in and do those programs. So that's where those are budgeted. Technical supplies mostly relates to the mechanics that are occurring within the building, meaning that this is your internet access for all of the Chromebooks that are being used. This is the photocopying costs that are included. We have costs for printing things. So it's more of it's in the classroom, but it's not necessarily the things you necessarily see because they're kind of the behind the scenes equipment. Some of the next line, the rental agreements, we have not been outright purchasing the Chromebooks. We have been leasing the Chromebooks, so we are on a 5-year cycle where every year we replace the 5th oldest set of computers, and those then get recycled back through the system many times for parts as we get to the very, very little guys. They've now been through multiple cycles and are really only useful for parts at that point. And then what we find in that particular line, the reason why it's going down so much, is we had 2 leases that went off in the 2021 year. It's taken us a while to get into the cycle of doing the replacement, where we actually have now organized it so that you replace for the 5th graders, and then those computers follow the children up until they're seniors. When they're seniors, then those computers then rotate back into the elementary schools, and we replace the next group of 5th graders. In the beginning, as we were trying to get the one-to-one initiative going, we were buying much, much larger purchases all at once because we were trying to get more than just 1 year's worth of computers, 1 school year's, worth of computers done. And so as those bigger leases come off, we have a reduction in the amount that we need to pay going forward. In terms of the area of supplies and textbooks, those areas are the equipment or the items that are needed within the classroom. This would include everything from your paper, your pencils, your art supplies, your science supplies that are used in the science classrooms up at the high school and at Lazar. So anything that is a consumable event, something that actually when I use it, it no longer is useful, is included in supplies. Textbooks tend to be something that can be reused over and over again 1 year after another. And definitely in the area of textbooks, you have that number varying from year to year depending on the types of series, new series that we're intending to purchase. So for this current year, we intend to do an adoption of a new vocabulary textbook at the elementary schools. We are doing the alignment of the science curriculum at the high school, new textbooks for the world language / ESL program, and then new electives at the high school needing new textbooks. So that number is going to vary from year to year based on what the need is. In total, the area of regular programs is increasing by a little more than 2%. Does anyone have any questions as they relate to regular programs?
I do.
Okay.
So, I'm just curious, since we've gotten the new Chromebooks, shouldn't our supplies be going down because the kids are using the Chromebooks pretty much for everything, communication, sending in, instead of sending in a paper, now they're sending their assignments?
You do see some declining in the area of supplies, and yes, that is definitely true. Particularly, there aren't as many packets, ditto packets, but you may not see that necessarily when we're only looking at these 4 years. I think you're going to need to go out farther than that in order to really see that type of decline. What you do see is in the area of other purchase services, where we're buying the licensing agreements. That's where you see an increase, again, over that same period of time, because in order to use a lot of those online products, we have to pay a fee to use them. So you're sort of getting a flip-flopping between lines.
Okay. And then I had a question about textbook. I'm not sure if you can answer that question. Is when does an administrator decide I'd like to change, or that would be the question.
So usually it's a 5 to 7 year cycle, and if the course radically changes because the standards that the state has set forth for us change, then we need to assess our textbooks and make that change. And then the CIT committee gets to review the textbooks. There's people that go along with it, and then the full board then approves it. And they're usually sitting in my office at the rooms before that happens.
With regard to the teachers,
Yes.
I noticed that there's $300,000, $200,000 in the next. So
Yeah, it includes the moving up on the guide, changes in longevity, so as people are here longer, and then guide changes. So I'm a teacher and I've got a BA, I go back to school and I'm able to move up onto the MA guide. We cover, that's part of the contract, we cover those costs.
And health
Is not involved. We're gonna do all the medical benefits, all the health benefits, all the employee benefits, that's all separate. And we'll do that all in one, for the entire district as we move forward. Okay, if you turn now to page 39, and again, the variance between 7 and 39 is there are backup pages that back up all those different line items. This now is not regular ed, this is special ed. So these are self-contained classrooms in which the needs of the students in the classrooms are such that this is the appropriate academic environment for them. And we have a number of self-contained classrooms within the district that we manage. Each of those individual classifications that are met through the needs of the teachers and the aides that are providing for those students are broken out. So we have cognitive disabled, learning language disabled, behaviorally disabled, resource center, autistic programs, preschool programs, and then there are home instructors who service just the special ed students. So that's what each of the different groupings represent. If we go up to the first grouping, which is the cognitive disabled group of students, the programs are run out of Lazar and out of the high school, and the increase that you're seeing on that line is just from the teachers moving along the guide. There are aides that are also working with those students in those two programs, and we have added an additional aide to that program. The addition of aides is really based on need. So the head of special services looks at where the students are going to fall for the year, and in the case of Lazar and the high school, she's looking at those 5th graders or those 8th graders moving into the two programs, examining what the need is, and then determining, can we release some people or do we need to add? So it's the same concept as the enrollment idea, where we move everybody up and look at who's going to be there in a particular building, but this is specific to the needs of these specific children, how we can address those needs. In the case of each of these programs, we do put aside money for them to buy supplies. So these would be supplies that are very specific to the program, that are needed for the students to achieve whatever it is that is being done in the classroom. A lot of the general supplies, the paper, the pencils, things like that, come out of the general stores. But these would be ones that would be very specific to the students in these programs. The next group is learning language disabled. And again, teachers, we're not changing. These programs are at the high school, Lazar, and Valley View. We have an elementary program that runs out of the Valley View building. No additional staffing for the learning language disabled teachers or aides. So the students moving up do not require any additional staffing, but we have included additional funds for supplies as we have begun to expand some of these programs, particularly in the elementary level. We found that they need additional supplies than what we have budgeted for the current year. Behaviorally disabled, that program runs at Lazar and at the high school. And in the case of the teachers, we don't anticipate any additional teachers, but we do anticipate an additional aide being added as those students are being projected up and the related supplies. Resource centers are addressing the majority of the students who are classified as special education. Those provide teachers who both are within the classroom, so you could have a resource room teacher in a 5th grade classroom at Cedar Hill, but you could also have another teacher who helps with that particular group of students in order to pull them out and service them individually depending on the needs of the students. That's also true at the high school and at Lazar. One of the things that we'll talk about as we look at this section and the next section is a change in the way we are offering programs. Many of the students who end up as being classified for resource room, we feel we might be able to better service them by servicing them through basic skills and the ESL program, English as a Second Language. And so what we've done is we've shifted staff. We are moving staff from the area of resource and moving them. We'll see them coming in on the next page when we get to that. So we are reducing 3 teachers at 3 of the elementary schools in the area of resource center, and we are reducing 15 aides. And again, that's as we begin to make that adjustment between the two sets of the various programs and the way we're offering servicing to these students. As a result of students being shifted and their programs being shifted, you see the decline in supplies and textbooks that would be comparable to not needing as much because there aren't as many students falling in this category. The autistic program, this is for the elementary level autistic program. Those programs are at Cedar Hill and at William Mason. And the amount of teachers that are expected for next year is comparable to that of this year, as with the related aides. Preschool, I mentioned that there were preschool programs in which we have regular students who are there as peers for the special needs students. There is also a program that is just special needs. The more severe special needs students who are preschool tend to be in this program, whereas the higher functioning tend to be in the other programs. So this is all special ed, and in that program, we expect to have the same number of teachers, but we do expect to add an additional aide as we begin to look at that program. That program has been expanding. We'll talk about the revenue stream that program produces when we get to the revenue side. And then as a conclusion to this section, I mentioned the home instruction that we saw in the regular ed area. Special ed also has that same type of thing. We send out teachers, and sometimes we need to contract teachers in order to go out. This would be to service specific students who are classified. So in this particular area, due to the changes that we're making to program in the area of resource, you see actually a decline in this area as you compare the 2 years. Does anyone have any questions related to special ed? Yeah.
I guess I'm still not understanding the transfers and reductions. So 188,000 to 382,000, those are reductions, correct?
Correct.
But if they're just being transferred, how is that reducing?
It's reducing on this in this area. We'll see them be picked up as we turn the page. The reductions that you're seeing in the aides is a true reduction. Some of them will get transferred to other programs, but many of them will just be ripped. And again, it's based on the way we're offering the program. Because of changes in the way that we're offering the program, we don't need as many aides, assisted support aides as we did.
We just moved money around.
It's going to another one.
It's going to another line.
Yeah, why don't if we can go to the next page and you'll get to see where that is going.
So just follow up then, it says reduction / transfer, then has a figure of 382,000. Is that? Okay, so it's 382 because it's either a reduction or a transfer.
Correct.
And some of the transfers will be picked up somewhere else?
Yes, so if we turn to the next page, which is page 78, what you'll see in the areas of special programs, these are programs that are running within the schools that, similar to the situation with special education, these students have additional needs outside of the regular classroom. However, they're not classified. There's no IEP that's directed to, or attached to that child in terms of services. These are areas like basic skills and the bilingual / ESL program. So in both cases, in the case of basic skills, these are students who are requiring additional assistance in order to get their basics needs met in the area, particularly math and English, reading. And then bilingual, this is a situation where English is not their first language, so they are stumbling over the need to first learn the English language and then proceed in the learning process. What we've done here is we've shifted staff members. So if you look at, for example, basic skills, which is the first grouping, you'll notice that there are 2 additional teachers that are being added to the elementary buildings, the elementary level, to provide basic skills. So these are adds. So of the 3 teachers that were being eliminated in the elementary levels, 2 of them are getting picked up here. Additionally, 1 is being picked up at the high school. So that change of 1 + 2 is the 3 that you're seeing being reduced at the elementary level on the resource side. In the case of bilingual or ESL, we are then adding 1.2 teachers to those programs, mostly at Valley View and Lazar. In the case of the bilingual program, most of those staff members in that program, many of them are part-time. So we pick them up in incremental amounts based on need. So what we've been finding lately is that we have a lot more students requiring those types of services than we have in the past, and so that 1.2 is actually 2 people, it's 2 1.6s, and we'll then spread them across the buildings as they're needed. So what you're finding is as you're decreasing in one area, you're increasing in another, and that's that change in program that I mentioned. With that comes the corresponding increase in supplies. We actually, in the case of basic skills, we purchased new textbooks this year, getting ready for this switching. We've been piloting this kind of change between the area of special ed and these other special programs over the last 2 years, particularly at Lazar. And so in this year, what we did was we purchased additional textbooks that would help us with that. And now as we begin to really fully pilot this program in 2021, you're seeing a variance in textbooks. It's just a period variance because of us buying all those textbooks this year. In the case of the basic skills, though, we are purchasing new textbooks for that program in the 2021 year. So as a result, this is an area that you're seeing going up. However, if you compare it to the decreases that you saw on page 39, we actually are netting a decrease in the budget as we shrink down this program in special ed a little bit more than just the replacement value that's occurring in basic skills and bilingual. Does anyone have any questions related? We kind of did those two collectively. Okay. The next page is page 89. Inclusive in the area of instruction is not just what happens in the day-to-day classrooms, but it is also the things that occur after school in the form of extracurricular activities, such as clubs, marching band, student council, and those programs are included on page 89. So the costs related to those programs that occur after school mostly are represented through salaries. So stipends are given at the elementary schools, middle school, and high school for these programs. So for example, the yearbook, the people who do the yearbook at both Lazar and the high school end up with a stipend for that amount. All the work that they do throughout the year, that stipend would be included in here. And that stipend, similar to the guides that we had mentioned in the teaching lines, is completely dictated by the collective bargaining agreement. So it actually outlines the increase in the stipend, which is 2% from one year to the next. Now we do have additional positions that are being added for the 2020 year. I think we've had this conversation at board meetings regarding the fact that if I want to introduce at any level, elementary, middle, or high school, a new program, a new after-school program, I go for the first 2 years with no stipend at all. I do it pro bono in an attempt to determine whether there's any interest in it, because I might really think that scrapbooking is cool, but if nobody else does, then we don't actually fund that particular club. But if I can get 2 years worth of students who are willing to participate with me, it's in that third year. And so we have been monitoring those clubs that have been out there unpaid, and many of them are due for coming online. And that's most of that increase that you're seeing in that line relates to us now, particularly at the high school, adding new clubs. As you may remember last year, Living Lessons ran at Lazar. It runs every other year. And so we had included it in the 18-19 budget, but not in the 19-20 budget. It's now up for another year, meaning next year will be done again. And so that increase you're seeing is just the amount that we budget for Living Lessons. Overall, this area increased by about 7%, mostly related to Living Lessons. Anyone have any questions on extracurricular or after-school programs?
I have a question. Does Living Lessons, do they ever have sponsorships? I just remember us donating money years ago.
The MEF contributes,
But there's still,
but there's still, the bulk of it is.
right, the bulk of it is us.
Those are PTC.
Yes.
I remember donating to it years ago.
And then those are students do a walkathon, but the program is expensive.
Yeah,
All those figures cost, travel expensive, money.
Yeah, so we do pick up, I'm not saying that it's not offset, but most of the volume of it is picked up by us.
No, that's it, but I'm just glad you're getting money from our
Oh, yes, yes.
organizations, that's great.
The next page is, we talked about after-school events that occur in the area of extracurricular. This is after-school events that occur in the area of athletics. This is only at the high school. So this would be your football, your basketball, your softball, all three sports. In the case of the sports, pretty much almost all the sports have 3 levels, meaning there is a varsity, there's a JV, and there is a freshman team. There are some exceptions, things like swimming, where it's all collective, track, which is all collective, and that's sort of the nature more of the sport than it is anything else. Some of it is related to interest. For example, bowling and tennis just do not pull the volume of students in order to warrant having 3 levels. But your larger sports, such as soccer, football, basketball, all of those have your 3 levels. Just like with the other areas, there are salary guides that are part of the collective bargaining unit that dictate the salaries of the coaches with longevity built in. So the longer you are a coach, the higher the amount that you're getting for that time that you spend working with the students. And we did not add any additional positions this year to the area of coaches. That increase is just simply them moving along that guide due to where they fall. Included in this area also is purchase services, things like student insurance, the fees that we pay to the officials when they come and they referee. We have trainers we bring training services in. Rental of facilities, things like ice hockey or swimming require us to actually rent a facility in order for the event to occur. So we've included money in there for that. We have experienced a very positive year this year where many of our teams have gone on to postseason play, but postseason play produces more cost because we have to pay for more fees to get into additional competitions. We pay for more officials, we pay for more transportation. Transportation is not included in this. We will hit transportation for athletics in a little while. But all of those additional plays result in additional costs. So you do see an increase in the purchase service line related to the additional expansion of the postseason, as well as the addition of, the expansion of the competitive cheer. As you know, the competitive cheer group did very well this year, and that program has been growing over the last few years, and as a result, additional monies are being put towards that program in order to continue to allow it to grow. Supplies include things like team uniforms, supplies for the trainers, small equipment that we need, things like nets and footballs and tennis nets and tennis balls and all of those different things. And mostly what generates, the way we do the uniforms is the uniforms are on a rotating basis, so every single sport rotates at different points, so we don't end up with everybody buying all the uniforms in one year. So that can vary a little bit depending on the participation of the students, how popular is the sport that is up for replacement this year, as well as just additional training supplies as the programs continue to grow. And then the last area, other costs, these relate to the fees for athletic tournaments. And again, the more we get involved in postseason, the more we have fees related to those athletic tournaments. So the increase mostly that you're seeing here is actually an increase from success. And us planning accordingly as we begin to project forward in terms of the programs. The final area in the area of, did anyone have any questions on that? The final area in the area of instruction is tuition. This is on page 104. These are the amounts that are paid to other organizations, other schools, who are educating our students. And the reason that they're educating our students is that the need of the student cannot be met by us in-house. Generally, this tends to be special ed, but it's not exclusively special ed. The first line in there is charter schools. Charter schools are available to all of the parents in the district if that is something that they feel that they'd like to participate in. It is a choice event. And as a result, these students are regular ed students, but they do attend schools outside of ourselves. We put money aside based on who we think either we have, in the case of we have someone right now, or I always put a little bit of extra because you never know who's going to show up to go to a charter school. So it's sort of a historical event you kind of use as a guide to help you. And you do see variances from year to year as a result of how much our students participate in charter schools. The next line that actually has anything budgeted on it is special ed in-state. So there are various programs. The first of that is in-state, meaning we are sending these students to other districts who have programs that we don't particularly have to do the education of the students. This is just the tuition, and it's based on their tuition rates. So their rates vary depending on what their numbers are in terms of their own projections. Additionally, you can have special ed students, I'm going down 2 lines, who are at the VOTEC. Many of those are shared programs, meaning they spend half of their day here and then half of their day at the VOTEC participating in programs that meet their interests as well as their needs. And we have budgeted extra money because as we look at what the students are involved in coming up through the rolling of the students up into the program at the high school, we are anticipating an increase in the number of students participating in that. If you then go down one more line, private special ed, these are private schools that are able to meet the needs. Again, it's based on what the needs of the students are. As students age out, we have students who then go off and are now no longer part of the program, and so as a result, the decline you actually see there is a small decline just based on students aging out and no longer us no longer participating in that program. And we can have students at state facilities. That's the last area that we have budgeted. So these are programs that are run by the state of New Jersey, and again, they're based on the needs. The line I skipped was the regular VOTEC line. So we talked about mostly, this, like I said, it's mostly special ed, but we do have some regular ed and students who opt to participate in the programs at Morris County School of Technology or their related academies get budgeted here. And this increase is comparable to what we've seen over the last couple of years. It's about a 10% increase every year in the number of students who are participating in those programs. So this is not an actual increase in the individual tuition, it's actually an increase in participation. More students are opting to participate in those technology programs or the programs offered by Morris County School of Technology or their related academies. So overall, this area is increasing by about 2%. But as I said, mostly 2% is driven by what the students' needs are and who the students are, more than a trend analysis from year to year. This is an area that changes from year to year. Does anyone have any questions?
Can you speak to our obligations as far as paying for the costs to go to charter schools and the VOTECs? What are
It's a legal obligation.
I know. Can you explain how the state mandates that and what our obligations to pay for that and how much of it?
It's a law.
I know, but how much are we obligated to pay?
We have every,
Okay, great. There's a formula for the charter school payment, which is depending, it's geared to our per pupil expense.
90% of our per pupil expense.
But for the academy programs, we pay the tuition that's been set by the university.
Yes, however, their tuition rates, and this is true across the board, including us, for when we get to our charging districts for students who come to us, is audited. So 2 years from now, the rates that we're charging right now, or the rates that we're incurring right now, will be audited. And when those are audited, there are adjustments. Sometimes they're to our benefit, meaning they overcharged us and we get a refund back, or sometimes we end up owing more. So those numbers are not unchecked, but it takes 2 years for you to get them realigned. All right. Oh, yeah.
I had a couple comments, but, and I had a couple thoughts on this, and you brought up one of them. So
Mike,
I
can you
think,
turn on the microphone, please?
so maybe I should wait to the end. Great relates to charter schools and VOTEC or something.
Yeah, because then we stay on.
I think there's a few bits of information. Those of us that are on the committee have great advantage that we can ask those questions from the committee and get more information. And information is essential to us, our role as board members. People ask questions, sometimes you don't know. So there is a little bit more of information, I think, that could go into this abbreviated budget. And my apologies for being numerous early on. You were talking about detail. Okay, I'm just trying to get that from this. But there are some very good questions. So, as an example, there are a lot of things in here that really should have a glossary. There should be a glossary contained in this for all board members. There are many things throughout the pages. Yes, on this title, that, whatever it is. And that would only have to be done once and be included for a year and to make it easy for board members to reference. Also, this is another thing is, I think they, valid question about charter schools. There's a lot of questions about it, but a very simple thing, how many students go to charter school? Like that could be good. Or we talk about 1, 2, 5. So there is some little tweaking, additional information that would help the board members who are on the committee, even if you're not on the committee, navigate the document.
Well, that's what she has as her in-between pages. Between the
Yeah.
100 and 200
Right,
pages. And
rather than,
if anybody wants to know, I
Yeah,
think
I
this is
think-
a time.
So
Right now, we have
you-
2 kids per charter school, right?
Right.
yeah, but I'm just talking about little tweaks, I'm not talking about that big book.
And I don't know, is there an interest in the number of students going to
Well,
VOTEC?
you brought up about, what does that number represent? How many students?
Off the top of my head, I don't
Well,
recall, but I certainly will get you the breakdown of the number of students, regular and special, at VOTEC.
and, like, how many of our students go to VOTEC, and how many do some go full-time, or whatnot, but that's not asking for a whole big page.
On
just-
average, it's about 20
Oh.
a year, so 20 in each class.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
okay,
correct.
but that would be helpful information for, I think, board members who are not in the community.
Sure.
I think I asked
information.
that question, and I think
Yes, you may very well
Yeah.
have this. All right, that's why we want to go through this and
Little
give you the
tiny
opportunity to ask
Yeah.
additional information that may not be included on the pages that we can then provide. Okay, so then, when we talked about in the beginning that we were looking at the instructional area, these are the areas that are included. So we have now completed the area of instruction. All the pink areas have now been done. We are then now transitioning into student support services. Student support services are areas that help the students within the classroom. So they could be things like guidance or child study team, but they could also be things like the media center. They are not directly occurring in the classrooms, but they help the students to succeed the events that are occurring in the classroom. So we are now on page 114, and the first area that is a student support service is attendance services. This is the cost of the secretaries at the high school and at Lazar who track attendance. They are the ones who that collect the information when you call in and say your student is not coming today, and they are also the ones who maintain all the records for attendance. And again, just like with teachers, the collective bargaining unit includes the secretaries, so this is all driven by them just moving on the guide. The next area, which is page 116, is health services. This is the district-wide dentist and doctor, but it is mostly the nurses in the 7 schools. So the medical staff Included on that line would be your school nurses, 1 for each of the elementary schools, and 2 at Lazar and 2 at the high school. And the increase is based on the collective bargaining unit. One of the things you'll note is that number is actually below 3. And the reason it's below 3 is because most of the staff members are at the top of the guide. Professional services includes providers who are not our employees, such as the district doctor and the district dentist. It would include substitute nursing. We sometimes have events where our own nurses are not able to meet all the needs of everybody, and so as a result, we will bring in substitute nurses for different reasons. Additionally, this includes drug testing, particularly at Lazar and the high school. Any additional costs that relate to those nursing offices, repairs, for example, of the audiometers that are in each of the nursing offices to test for hearing, supplies, the medical supplies that they have in the offices, all of that is included in here. And then finally, other objects is the costs of the nurses being able to participate in membership in professional organizations or going on a workshop that would apply to something that they're doing. Overall, this area is increasing by 2.6%. Does anyone have any questions on health services?
I do. What kind of supplies do nurses need? They can't give aspirin out, they can't give things to the kids, so I'm just curious.
There's a lot of Band-Aids.
Ice
Yeah.
packs.
Ice packs, no. Ice packs, Band-Aids.
It's a lot each year, so I'm wondering if there's something big that they all
No,
use in
no. I mean, you think about that, that's 7 buildings, and 2 of those buildings are servicing 1,800 and 1,000 students. So that's a lot of students and a lot of Band-Aids. And I know that sounds funny. I mean, I'm actually not trying to be funny. It really is Band-Aids and ice packs.
May I, as we're going through this, there's a page that sort of relates, I think, to this. It doesn't have a number. I happen to have it in between page 6 and 7, and it's the page about staffing.
Oh,
And
yes, I didn't include that particular, right.
But it's very helpful, like,
I
you
can
see there are
definitely
this
provide
many
that.
nurses, okay, like,
Oh,
by using
right,
that,
right.
you see there, it doesn't have a number, but how many more people have been added, how many nurses, how many, so many things, secretaries, we talked about attendance secretary, and it's all on there, and it shows you a lot of information. I think that's a really.
So one of the things that we did in finance and facilities, before we started looking at this
You don't
detail.
have that?
No, because I didn't even think to include it honestly, but what I'll do is I'll send all this information out. So what we ended up doing was, before we started going into this in detail, we just looked at what the staffing was going to look like. So we took the number of staff in each of the different areas, nurses being one of them, and for each building, and then if it was going to increase or decrease, and we showed that change, and we were able to evaluate what the overall staffing changes for the entire district would be. But absolutely, Mr. O'Brien is right. It was helpful because it told you information like there are 2 nurses at Lazar in the high school and only 1 at each of the elementary.
You can glean so much.
Yes, you can.
from those.
And honestly, I didn't even think to include it, so I will send that out. When any other questions, I'll send out a piece of paper tomorrow that has answers to everybody's questions, and I'll make sure I include that document in there. And actually, the other document that we looked at, which I didn't include, was the enrollment roll-up. So I'll include that document as well, so that you
That's
can
in here.
see
Yep.
how we came to come up with how many students we anticipate to be here next year. I'll include that one as well. All right, the next page is page 122, related services. These are services that are provided to students who have IEPs, and in their IEPs, they need occupational or physical therapy, they need speech therapy, or other types of therapies. We have students who have limited hearing, so that would be included, limited sight, that would be included. Pretty much any additional services that a student might need as part of their IEP is included in here. We do have professionals on staff who provide these services, and that's part of the student's normal day that they will be pulled out for their particular therapy. And those individuals are part of the collective bargaining unit, so they will move on the guide just like the other staff members within the district. However, we also have students who are receiving those types of services at their out-of-district placements. So if you are placed out, we have tuition, which we already talked about, but if you have speech therapy or OT or PT therapy, that therapy is included here and it's included on the professional service line. So similar to the decline that we saw, small decline in tuition, on the tuition page, you're seeing a small decline in related services for those students who are out at various locations on this page. And then the supplies that they need. Particularly in the areas of OT or PT, there will be very specific supplies that are necessary for the staff members to do the different exercises and different therapies that they do with the students. So those specialty items are part of what is included in the supply lines. This area is increasing by 2.4%. Anyone have any questions? The next page is extraordinary services on page 127. Extraordinary services are essentially one-to-one service. So this would be a situation where possibly medically a student needs a nurse with them, a personal nurse that stays with that one student. This could also be a situation of an aide who has been assigned to a student due to their 504 needs or their special education needs, but it relates to one-on-one servicing. We do have aides who are part of our employee, who are included on that first line. And then we have professional staff members. Again, these are the one-to-one aides that relate to the students who have been placed out. So if I have a student who's in tuition who requires a one-to-one aide, this is where the one-to-one aide is included. The increase, which is really the most of the increase that you see, is simply based on the evaluation of students out of our district who require a one-to-one aide. So these are students who have been placed out and they're at their individual schools, not in the district, but their needs require a one-to-one assistance. Next page is page 133, guidance services. These are your guidance counselors, your student assistance counselors who are at the 7 schools. So again, just like with the other areas, the increases in this area relate specifically to where the staff members are falling on the guide. Additionally, there are guidance secretaries at the high school and at Lazar who help assist the staff at those 2 individual buildings. And those individuals are also on their own guide, their secretarial guide, and those increases relate to that. We have had, in the past 2 years, we have had programs such as the ANGST program last year and the vaping program this year that have been sponsored by the guidance area, director of guidance. Those different programs, like the presentations that we were talking about, the assemblies, like STEAM assemblies that we've spoken about earlier, require payment to the individuals who come to do that. We have had great support by DAC and some other organizations to help fund those in the past, but as we begin to expand, asking for more and more and more of those types of programs, we had mentioned about the social media program that's going to be offered at the end of this month. That's an additional program. We now are needing to budget for some of these. So the changes you're really seeing on the line of professional services in this area relate to the expansion of more of these types of presentations to students at the various schools, as well as to the parents at night. And again, on these hot topics, things like anxiety and stress, vaping, social media usage, all of those are the types of programs. And yes, if we can find someone to fund the program like we have in the past, we certainly will utilize that, but we don't want to be restricted and not be able to do the program because we don't have funding in order to support it. So that's the increase in that line. Additional increases and changes in accounts, these areas will also include things like the travel for the guidance staff, professional development for the guidance staff, supplies that are used within their offices and as they work with the students, membership for the staff in the area of guidance. So all those different costs are included in this. It's the idea of each of these sections is you include all the costs that relate to the staff members involved. Overall, due to us budgeting additional money for those programs, you have about a 4.7% increase. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. The next page is page 141, child study team. So for all the students who have individual educational plans, those plans are developed and evaluated each year by the child study team. Each student with an IEP will have a team who is assigned to them and a case manager who's assigned to them who will evaluate their needs, and that's how either additional needs in the following year are added or possibly removed depending on where the student stands and what the needs are. In terms of who is included, you have your full team, so your school psychologist, your social worker, your behavioralist, and in the case of the plan for 2020, we are adding a 0.6 behavioralist to Valley View. Valley View has the preschool program. That's where that's located, the special ed preschool program. And so this behavioralist would be assigned to that program as a behavioralist is needed for the students' needs in that program. So that is why you're seeing an increase there. Additionally, there are secretaries that are assigned to the area of special services. They are included in here. Professional services include things like the neurological exams and other evaluations that are done to as the students are being evaluated in the development and changes of the IEP. Additionally included in this area is the vocational program. So at the high school, for the students who are special ed, who will not be going on to college, but will need to be transitioned into the workforce, we have a vocational program to assist them. These would be students of very high need, meaning they will need assistance in order to transition from a school environment into a work environment. They won't be able to make that transition easily on their own. And so they participate and are part of that vocational program, and that program stays with them as they then go through that process of learning how to transition from a school environment into what will be their work environment going forward. And that program is being expanded as we address the needs of the students who are moving through. So we happen to be in a situation right now where we're going from only a few students requiring such assistance to transition to about, I think the total was about 10 students who need to transition across the high school's experience. We begin that program in 9th grade, and then they work with the students all the way through, and from some postgraduate as well, to get them to fully transition into their work environment. So that large increase, really the increase that you're seeing mostly for this particular area, relates to the expansion of that particular program at the high school. Other purchase services include travel. It also includes in-service programs that we provide to the child study team, workshops, conferences, things like that. Behavioral classroom approaches for behavioral challenges is a new program that we will be doing with the child study team as we provide assisted support for behavioral issues in the classroom. And just like in the other areas, we include things like the supplies that they use and the professional fees that they have due to participating in membership organizations. Total increase here, again, due to that increase in the vocational program, is a little less than 10%. Does anyone have any questions? The next area is curriculum services. This is the maintenance, planning, and the development of the district's curricula. The first line, which includes staff members, these are your district-wide supervisors. And similar to the other bargaining units we talked to, there is a collective bargaining agreement that exists for the supervisors, and the movement or change in their salary is based on that movement on the guide. There's a secretarial staff member who is assigned to them, and again, same thing with her change in the amount. We are in a cycle where we are doing the development of new curricula in the areas of mathematics, English, science, language arts, social studies, world language, special ed, and the arts, as we align the curriculum to benchmarks. So you see an increase in the amount of money that's being put aside for stipends. That's that third line down, curricula staff. Those are the stipends that are paid to the teachers as they rewrite curricula in different areas. And because this year we're doing a lot of revising of curricula to benchmarks, you're seeing an increase in that line. And then again, supplies, travel, professional organizations related to supervisors. This area is increasing by 5.6%. The next page is media. This is the staff that are in each of the media centers throughout the district. There are 7 members of our staff who work in one in each of the buildings' media centers. Additionally, this also includes stipends for staff members, teachers, who help in this particular media center during the lunch period hour. The way that lunch is done here is all the students at the high school have lunch at the same time. And so during that 1 hour, it's hard for one person to manage all the needs that come into this room during that hour. And so we have staff members who receive a stipend as part of the contract to come in and just assist her. So that is also included in here. The increase that you see in supplies relates to Valley View and to Woodmont, both of whom have new media centers. And with the new media centers, they did a lot of removing of old books that were not really going to be used. They cleaned. And as a result of cleaning, and we did this last year with Cedar Hill, we allowed them a little extra money to replace now additions as their new media centers are now complete. This area increased by about 6%. Questions? And the last area in the area of student support services is staff training. So as you know, every agenda there is a very long list of professional development that different staff members are attending throughout the district. That professional growth is budgeted here. That can include in-service programs in which we bring the speaker in to the district to do the presentation, as well as the fees related to the teachers and staff going out to actual workshops, and then related supplies related to the presentations or the actual rolling out of the programs. In the 2021 year, we're intending to do in-service programs on the adverse childhood experiences, which Ms. Woodring had done a presentation to you all on a few board meetings ago, as well as ADHD. This area increased about 9%, mostly because of that increase in service programs. Any questions? Okay, so that means that we now have completed the student support service area. The next area is the area of administration. It's blue. The first area that we look at under administration is general administration. It is the administration of the superintendent's office as well as of the Board of Education. So these are costs that either relate to the superintendent's office and the running of the district as a whole, or to costs that are related to the Board of Education. The staff is inclusive of the office of the superintendent and is based off of the employment agreements that we have with those staff members. Legal services is the board attorney, and you'll notice that that number has been declining every single year as we've been managing it better. Auditing, the auditor is included in this area. The architect would be included in this area, however, because of the referendum and most of the work that we're doing right now is through the referendum funds their cost as it's related to the total program. But as we begin to proceed out of the referendum, which will begin to happen starting in 2021 and into 21-22, we'll begin to see amounts being budgeted onto this line. Other professional services, this would include your policy service. It would include things like the software for personnel that we use, those types of things. Insurance for the general professional liability and bonding insurance for specific administrators throughout the district, essentially that's me. Lease rentals is the photocopiers. Office travel, this is the travel for the superintendent and for the board. Office supplies for the superintendent and the board. Judgments, again, the amount that are included in that has declined significantly over the years. The amount that's included in the 1920 and the 2021 years, you'll notice it's the same amount. That is the 5-year payout on the $400,000 penalty from the OFAC audit that was done last year, where they penalized us for overstating our special ed counts and resulted in additional the special ed and regular ed counts that we had to then pay back. So we're doing it in an installment plan of over 5 years. And then finally, other objects includes the fees for participating in organizations such as New Jersey School Boards and other professional organizations. Due to our management of legal services in a more positive way, this area has actually declined by about 8%.
On this one. Legal services. Where's that $37,000 figure coming from? How do you get that figure in? Considering that the 3 years before that was $489,000, $214,000, $187,000. We really think we can get probably $37,000 in legal fees this year?
Yeah, based on that analysis that you've been receiving every month, you know, the one that has all the different firms that we do business with, we are well within that number. I know, it's good, right? Actually, you have another one, there's a bill on, I always give it to you whenever the bills come in, so you'll get another one on Friday for the ones that are on the bills list for this meeting on 17th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's your dime.
Christine, did you take into account negotiations?
I did. Okay, the next page, which is page 183. Whereas the previous page, we discussed the administration of the district as a whole and the Board of Education. On page 183 is the administration of the individual schools. So this would be your principals in each of the 7 buildings, as well as the assistant principals. It would also include directors, such as the director of special services and their related secretaries. All of those are driven by the collective bargaining agreements that have been put in place with those individual bargaining units. Purchased services that are included in here would include travel and workshops, conferences. Other objects would include things like their individual membership dues to participate in various organizations. Supplies include the amounts for graduation as well as just office supplies. So the predominant amount of that is to the balances that you're seeing in supplies actually relate to the graduation costs for Lazar and for the high school, but it also includes the supplies that are being used in those offices district-wide. And this area increased by about 3%. The last area that is included in administration is support services. These are additional administrators that don't basically fall into the other 2 categories. That is the business office and the technology area. So the first grouping is the business office. This includes both the business office as well as personnel, the individual who does personnel. So support services is just the staffing that's included in those particular groups. Professional and technical services are things like our software. So this would be your personnel software. This would be your financial software packages. All of those computerized packages we have to pay a cost to actually use, and so all those licensing fees and support that those organizations provide us through the software are included in that line. Leases include our photocopiers. Travel and other objects include workshops and travel to conferences as well as membership. in terms of professional organizations, and then supplies or the supplies used within the organization, within the offices. This would be things like the purchase orders, the W-2s, the 1099s, all those different things come out of these areas, as well as paper, pencils, things like that. Overall, the area of the business office and personnel is increasing by 2.8%. The second area, which is technology, this is the technology department for the district, is included on the first line, all the staff members that are part of that program, their travel, their membership in professional organizations, and then supplies related to toner and cartridges and cables and all those different things that are used. Things like the actual internet and the computers are all included in the other areas that we've already done because they're assigned to the actual places where they're being used. This is only the costs related to the actual department, the actual human beings that are in the department and what they produce. And that increased by 3.7%. Any questions? Okay, and now we are transitioning into the last area, which is the area of operations and capital improvements. This is the green area. The first section in this area is the area of required maintenance of plants. So we are required by the state of New Jersey to spend a certain percentage of funds on our buildings. That's actually a requirement. And that evaluation of what that percentage is very low, it's only like 6%. But we have to show each year that we've at least spent that. So this area is going to include the maintenance staff, the actual maintenance workers that are included as part of our maintenance staff, the supervisors, the secretary in the area of operations, the repair costs. So we try to do as much as we can in-house, but there are services that we need to bring in specialized people. For example, we need to bring, if the elevators break, generally we bring someone in to fix them. Sometimes we need additional assistance if the electrical or plumbing need is beyond the scope of what the maintenance guys feel that they can repair. We then bring in external providers. What you'll see is a movement, a decrease in the area of repairs and an increase in the area of supplies. What we have been slowly trying to do is that as we've had maintenance members leave the district, we have been trying to replace them with individuals with very specialized skills in an attempt to try to do more of that repair work ourselves than actually contracting it out. So we're trying to decrease the amount of external repairs and increase the amount of internal, which produces a little bit more in supplies because we need the actual stuff to actually do the repair. But everything related to that repair of the buildings is included in this area, and that's increased by 3.8%. The second grouping is pulling out the costs related to maintaining the grounds. So this would be snow removal, this would be mowing, and the cost related to those two areas for repairing our snow removal equipment, repairing our lawn maintenance equipment, the cost of the supplies to maintain those two programs are all included in here. Anyone have any questions on maintenance? The next page is operations. This is the cleaning custodial aspect or the overall operating of the plant. So inclusive in the operating staff are a number of different groups. And when I mention them, you are going to wonder why in the world would we include these people here. This is where the state of New Jersey has indicated they want us to include these people, and they see them as part of the operation of the building. It includes our 3 employees who are custodial members. So about 10 years ago, the district went out and it privatized most of its custodial services, but what it did when it did that is it kept on whoever they currently had. Whoever they currently had 10 years ago is now down to 3 people through attrition. And so as a result, those 3 people are included as employees. That's our first line. In addition to them are the lunchroom aides. So the aides that we hire to be in the lunchroom, during lunch periods is considered to be an operational cost, and so they are included in this line as well. Those are the aides in the elementary schools, as well as the stipends for the teachers who assist during the lunch period, the one lunch period when everybody's eating at the same time in this building. The second line is professional services. That is the contract for the company that does our custodial cleaning. And I have mentioned, I believe at this level, definitely in finance and facilities, that we will be going out for RFP, a request for proposal for those services for the 2021 year. So we did build in a little higher of an increase because I don't know where those prices are going to come out when that RFP is opened. Cleaning and repairs includes things like recycling and garbage collection. Dr. Cordolino mentioned that shared services, this is one of those areas where we do a lot of shared services with the town. We are part of an agreement with them for the collection of garbage, recycling, small repairs on a lot of our equipment that relates in the buildings. We many times will go to the town and they can help us do a repair cheaper than if we were to go outside to somebody else. The agreement that we have with the town regarding the rental of the board office is that we are required every year to put money aside, $10,000, for the purpose of maintaining that building. So the amount that's included under rentals is that $10,000 that's budgeted each year for that purpose. Included in this area are all of your utilities, so your water and sewer, your gas and electric are all included in here, and they're all budgeted comparably. We do a 10% increase for all of the utilities. In terms of insurance, this is your general property and your vehicle insurance. And then supplies used, cleaning supplies essentially, for the custodians and the building staff. The increase in this area, mostly related to that RFP and us not knowing where that pricing is going to come out, is a 6% increase.
Yeah. In regards to that RFP, I mean, is that, you anticipate an increase just because an increase over time? I mean, it seems like a high potential increase. If you're going to bid to different companies, it would seem we have competitive, just seems like a high additional amount to me.
Well, like with the bidding, we put out the RFP and whoever comes, and so we don't, although with an RFP we have the ability, we don't have to select the lowest, we can select based on other criteria. However, what happens in those RFPs when they come is what happens. The only other way we would get lower prices, if we could even get lower prices, would be to go out and get them. So it's very similar to the bid cycle, and unfortunately I don't have the ability to guess what the market is going to do. A lot of the reason, we actually have one more year on the GCA contract. A lot of the reason why we're going out is we're unhappy with service. They had a change in their upper management. They actually got bought out by another company. And since that purchasing process that occurred with the company, their cleaning services have really gone down. So what I'm hoping is going to happen is I actually get a decrease in the cost of the entire package.
Right.
But I don't know that that's going to happen.
Hopefully it would be.
And you can see, because of the size of the contract, if I am off by a percentage or two, it's a big swing.
Right.
The second grouping that's on there is security. So this is your building security. This is your school resource officer. We have one school resource officer located at the high school. And then currently we have a class 3 officer who is also located at the high school. The school resource officer travels between the buildings and does programs at each of the elementaries as well as Lazar. What we have proposed for 2021 is to add another class 3 officer who will be housed at Lazar. So the plan for the 2021 year would be to have one resource officer who travels throughout the district servicing all the buildings, but one permanent person who is located at the high school and one permanent person who is located at Lazar. So there will be 3 in total.
Is that cost can be shared with the township, or is that just us?
That's just us.
Can you explain why Lazaro needed that? Because is he going to be going into the classrooms, or I'm just curious what their position would
Yeah, I
be.
mean, initially when we had the conversation
conversations? Initially when we had the conversations with the township, there was a thought about adding a position at Lazar. At the time, we fit what we could into the budget with the thought that down the road, we would love to see one there as well. They don't have, the SRO doesn't teach it, so the class 3 officer would not be going into the classroom in a teaching capacity. But certainly there to interact with the students just as the class 3 officer does here at high school.
I'm just curious because even with Parkland, they have officers on the school, in school, on the school grounds, and I'm just wondering not to make mistakes that they made. And, you know,
These
I don't want-
officers are very thoroughly trained. We've had tremendous success with folks here at the high school, and we really feel that having that presence at the middle school will be extremely helpful.
I think it's a pretty good recommendation. From my own experience, I'm concerned on the opposite. We have too much on the opposite. The presence of the SROs in the schools adds something to not only the security of the school, but the school of the officers, the interaction that they can have with students, have the proper people who
Right.
are an asset to the school.
no, I
I would
agree.
almost err on the side of more.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how he would be, or she would be different than what the high school has in the elementary. It's just not a false sense of security.
The high school has a class 3 now. Lazar will have a class 3. They're both around 800. The SRO does work throughout all the schools. There's also at the high school probably. This is someone on board there all the time. Okay, and as I said, it's more than just handling security. They find out what's happening, the kids go to them. I think it's great, every system I've been in recently.
I see it all the time, the kids interacting with the SRO.
Good.
And also the presence of the SROs, the police visual presence of the vehicle outside. So I think it's an actual deterrent. It's the first thing you pull in a parking lot and see that vehicle, and right away it's in place. You know, there's somebody there.
Are they in uniform? Because I've never
Yes.
seen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I understand.
They're trained, very highly trained, professional.
They carry a weapon.
Yeah.
They have to be
That's good. Okay.
And to check the weapon in and out, you know.
And they're all retired police officers.
Yeah.
Great.
They're professionals.
It's not just picking someone off the street. And that's good.
They're not a security guard per se, they're retired police officers who go through special training.
Good. I like hearing that.
Okay, the next page is page 232, it's transportation services. So this is all of the costs related to transporting students from home to school. We have one staff member who works as our supervisor of transportation, who is included on the first line. Included in regular transportation would be both your remote and non-remote transportation, as well as transportation for things like the late bus at Lazar. We do have arrangements in which we do jointures. This is particularly with parents in which the student has medical needs is usually the reason why, that they are not able to be on a school bus. And so we create a jointure with the parent drives the student back and forth and is then paid for via that agreement. But again, it's a very limited number and it has to meet a certain number of criteria in order to occur. Special education, so we have now looked at the tuition related to students who have been placed in other schools. We've looked at their related service costs. We have looked at their one-to-one aids. We have looked at their other services that they receive. Now the last piece is transporting, getting them back and forth from their school of selection to their home, and those costs are included on the transportation line. If a parent has elected to send their student to a non-public school, they are entitled to aid in lieu of. That aid in lieu of is $1,000 annually per student. And the change that you see in that line just relates to a estimate of additional students who will be partaking of those opportunities at other non-public schools. I mentioned the fact that our athletic costs are included in the athletic area, but the transportation costs would be seen in another section. This is the other section. The third line from the bottom includes mostly the cost of transporting the students back and forth to athletic events, but it also can include things like field trips, things like DECA and FBLA, as well as events at the elementary schools and at Lazar. So most of the changes that you see here are based on the contracts. With existing contracts, we are able to increase them just by the CPI, which is 1.7% this year. But with contracts that we will have to go out and rebid, those can come in similar to the RFP we mentioned with the custodial services. You don't know what they're going to come in at. So we budgeted a little bit of extra money for that purpose. Overall, however, the area is increasing by 3.6%. Next area is food services. This is the amount that the board contributes to the food service program for the purpose of those students who are receiving free and reduced lunches. We do not participate in the national or state child nutrition programs because of the number of students that we have receiving these types of services. We opt instead just to subsidize, and so we actually pay for their lunches based on them qualifying for either free or reduced. We do, however, use the state and national standards that are used to actually assess whether they would be free or reduced. The next page, which is page 243, is equipment and capital improvements. The first grouping is for equipment, and that area changes from year to year depending on what we're purchasing. In the case of 2021, we are purchasing one item, which is a baritone saxophone at Lazar, and that's it. The second grouping includes, again, varies from year to year depending on the projects that we're doing, but the one thing that is consistent is the SDA assessment. This relates to when the district participated in the School Development Authority's grant programs in the early 2000s. Part of the agreement that it agreed to when it took their money to do the projects was that it would pay a maintenance assessment in perpetuity. So you'll notice the amount is the same every single year, and that was what we agreed to when we signed those grants. So when we got millions of dollars from them in SDA grants, this is the small fee that we have to pay for participating in that program. The last line is capital reserve. So as we begin to transition out of the referendum, meaning we are in the final phases of finishing up phase 3 of the referendum. And as we begin to exit out of the ESIP, phase 2 of the ESIP, we will be moving into capital projects that the only funding source that we really have available to us is either through the regular budget or through capital reserve. At the end of every year, we put money into capital reserve for the purpose of doing maintenance, large maintenance projects or large capital projects that we wouldn't be able to fund through the regular budget. So this is all part of our long-range facilities plan, just like the referendum was, just like the ESIP was. It's just a different section of that. And so we are beginning to transition for the summer of 2020 into projects that are going to be funded through capital and maintenance reserves. We have been discussing how we wanted to tackle these projects. We've got these types of projects at every building throughout the district. we decided that we would start with the high school as it is the premier building, and we will be working our way to Lazar and eventually to all the other elementary schools as well. So predominantly, most of these costs relate to work that is being done at the high school. We will be doing exterior building repairs and doing a lot with branding and signage. So we now have our branding committee and our branding stuff all done. We will be adding branding to, for example, the dugouts that are along Horseneck Road. They'll have the big new horse on them that represents the Mustangs. Everything will be in the Montville green. We will be doing new signage in terms of a larger signage on the building in terms of Montville Township High School, so that it's more prominent when you're coming up and you can identify it quicker. Signage again with branding in different spaces on the outside. Landscaping is also included in this. The repair of the steps and the railings as you walk up into the main area of the high school. Paving the parking lots at the high school. All of this work is basically doing those other projects that wouldn't have fallen under the PSIP or the referendum, but are projects that are needing our attention. Additionally, we will be doing a partial roof replacement at Woodmont. We did do partial roof replacements as part of the referendum, but Woodmont was not one of the schools that was included in that. And so as we begin to transition into this other stuff, we want to get these other partial roof replacements done. And so now Woodmont is up for that work. So you see a really large increase due to our draw out of the capital reserve. It's not actually a very large increase when you look at just the capital or just the assessment. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, just, because I'm still understanding some of the things, the equipment, says there's one item that's here for like $3,800, that's down from $160,000. So there's no other equipment we need to buy, sir?
Nope, no one put in for anything else.
Now, capital reserve, is that something, how does that compare to just our general reserve budget? Is there two separate items, so capital reserve and general reserve?
Yeah, so in terms of our reserves, you have our general reserve, which is our unreserved fund balance. Then we have two additional reserves that are there, which includes capital reserve, which is at about $3 million right now, and a maintenance reserve, which is at about $400,000. Those can be used for specific capital and maintenance projects that meet the criteria of the two reserves, but when they get budgeted, the withdrawals get budgeted as part of the budget cycle.
We have to then build that back up over the course of years?
Yes. So part of our process is to be monitoring the process of building up and then withdrawing, trying to get the work done that we need to get done while also trying to meet those reserves at their current levels.
So what part of the budget goes towards building that capital reserve back up?
Right, anything that we don't use by the end of the year, we would then pass a resolution. That's a resolution that's on the last June board meeting to go and put money into both the capital and the maintenance reserve. So anything that we haven't utilized throughout the year, we automatically put towards those reserves in order to continue to build it so we can always, so into the future we'll have the ability to continue to do repairs.
So even items in the budget have nothing to do with equipment or maintenance would go into capital reserve at the end of the year?
Yes, if we didn't spend the money, yes, we have that ability to sweep. Yep.
And we've got two more, let's finish this up, continue now, it's getting late.
And then that finishes up operations and capital. We had mentioned that the district employee benefits. We are now on page 267. So for the entire district, this is all of the employee benefits for everyone. This is not specific to any one group. So all the employees that we just went through, they all have the need for us to carry an employer match for Social Security. They have monies that we contribute based on who they are on pensions. We have to carry workers' comp insurance according to the state of New Jersey. We have in the collective bargaining agreements monies put aside for medical, dental, vision, and prescription insurances. Also part of the agreements has tuition reimbursement, payouts for unpaid sick, things like the replacement of uniforms for our custodians and maintenance staff. All of those are considered benefits, and all of those are included in these areas. The biggest area that you see change in, well, two. The first is the area of other contributions. That relates to payments that we need to make based on the employees' pensions, our employer share. For the teachers and certified staff, the state of New Jersey picks up that employer portion of the contribution. However, in the case of the non-certificated staff, the board has to pick that up, and that varies based on how many people you have. So as we continue to increase the number of non-certificated staff members, the amount we put forward in pension increases on a comparable amount. So that's what that increase is. The second place that you see a big change is in the area of insurances. This is your medical, dental, vision, and prescription. That increase is very small in comparison to what we've seen in previous years, and that relates to the fact that we had a negative increase for state health benefit premium contributions for the calendar year of 20. So we have had that affect both the 1920 and the 2021 year, but it relates to both of those numbers being quite depressed from what they had been in the past, which is a positive thing. And as a result, the total increase in this area is about 2.5%. That now is all of the areas that relate to the general fund, the general operating fund. I had mentioned that we have two other funds that are part of the budget cycle on page 276. That includes the special revenue fund, which is from a number of different sources. Local would be providers organizations who have grants that they have given us through the MEF is an example of that. State sources, which are for the non-publics, those are flow-through monies, meaning they give them to us and then we give them directly to the non-publics within the township. Those would include things like money to the Trinity Christian, when St. Pius existed, St. Pius. And then the last grouping, which is the largest grouping, is funds from federal sources for specific title programs and for students with disabilities. We always budget the federal monies at about 15% of the current funding because we're always told that there's no guarantee above that 85%. So we always end up budgeting lower and then adjusting the expenditures accordingly. The last page, which is page 277, is for debt service. When the board agrees to a referendum and the taxpayers of the district agree to a referendum, it agrees to raising taxes for the purpose of paying off debt into the future. So in that, we will have a principal payment for the different series that are outstanding and then an interest payment. In the 1920 year, we had a series, the 2004 series, that had its final payment made. And so you see a decrease in the amount of principal and interest for 2021 because of the elimination, the paying off of that 2004 series. What the 2021 figures include are the issuances in 2008 and 2016, which were actually, we refinanced those, and then the newest one, the 2018 issuance, which relates to the referendum that we passed in 2017. If we go back to page 6, that is the summary of everything we just reviewed.
And you will all be tested next week on this, okay?
So overall, you have an increase of about 2.7%, and then the special revenue and debt. If you then turn to the very first page, which is page 2, that is the matching revenue side. If you go through the exercise of looking at the totals on page 6 for the general fund and compare them to the totals on page 2 for the general fund, what you will notice is that for each of the individual years, those numbers agree, meaning that's a balanced budget. That's also true for special revenue and debt service. In terms of the revenue side, The revenue side is generated from a number of different sources, local, state, and federal sources, as well as the contributions that we make as part of our fund balance. The pink section is the local sources, mostly, like most suburban districts, that is the tax base. But it does include other sources, such as the tuition for students who come to attend our programs. So we talked a lot about students who go to other schools in order to meet their needs. Well, we can also be a place where a student from another district, actually, we meet their needs better and they pay us tuition. Inclusive also in this is the tuition for the preschool regular students who come to the program that we mentioned, that we had that inclusion program where it was partially regular and partially special. Transportation fees, the amounts for the subscription busing is included in this. And then just miscellaneous things like, for example, when we talked about the audit that's done on the tuitions for the placements out and we get a refund, that would be in here. Things like interest, things like use of facilities, all those fees come in here. Game receipts are all part of that miscellaneous number. The yellow section is from the state, and that is the state aid that has been recently spoken about in the news. If you had read an article where it told how much Montville had received, we had additional $452,000 in state aid, and you can actually see that in that section. In addition to those state aids that were mentioned in that article, we also have extraordinary aid, which we receive at the end of the year. That's based on costs for students for whom the amount that we spend is considered over and above extraordinary, and we receive a percentage of that money back. The federal programs is the SETI program, which is a federal program in which we are able to access for families who desire to participate, Medicare funds for students who are both low income and special needs. And then finally, the last area is what we budgeted. We've been trying to reduce that number over the years, and so we are budgeting a little bit more than $1 million from our current reserves. As we mentioned, we have the withdrawal from the reserves for the capital and the maintenance reserve. That number is exactly the same as the expenditures we've just spoken about. And then special revenue is from the various sources we had mentioned. The debt service, we received debt service aid. That aid was the 40%. If you remember when we did the referendum, we were going to receive 40% from the state to help offset the costs of the referendum. That payment from debt service aid is that 40%. And then the appropriation of fund balance, which actually is the interest earned off of the referendum monies that have been collected over the last few years. I do draw attention to the local tax levy. We have the ability to use, to go up to the 2% statutory cap. We did elect to do that. In addition, we also have the ability to exercise banked cap, which is money that we've earned from previous years, but we did not use, and we have those funds are available to us for 3 years into the future. And so we elected to use $500,000 of that, and those amounts are included in that local tax levy. The net impact of the tax levy, we do in 2 different ways. On page 3, we do it based on the average house, which is assessed at $529,000, and then we also do it by every 100,000. So depending on how much your house is assessed for, you can then figure out how much the tax increase is. On that average house, though, the increase of all of this that we've talked about is about $225. Does anybody have any questions?
And all of these figures are in the resolutions that we're being asked to approve on a tentative basis. And Sharon, I don't think we're going to have time at the next 2 meetings. We have a pretty long meeting tonight on the budget. And I would encourage any questions, check with the administration, but we have the public hearing coming up. So we have a lot of kids on at the next 2 meetings. So I think we went through quite a comprehensive review tonight. So what I'm suggesting, if anybody have any questions, get them to the administration, and then the administration can give them answers. But I think it would be helpful if all of us got the answers. because some of us might know, like, maybe I might have the same question that Karen might have or something like that. It's not, you know, it's, we need this to be done on April 28th, but anybody has a right to bring it up at any of the next two meetings.
Right, I think that's.
Yeah. We don't want to set aside a half hour for another proposal.
Just a quick question on the debt service and the SDA, right? That's where we get our money from, the SDA.
Well, the SDA was a funding source for projects. It was on the capital project
So we
side.
don't need to commit to another assessment in perpetuity.
No. Actually, they're not giving those out
Just
anymore.
checking.
No.
So we don't have an option to
I'm
participate.
not really sure how they would do that.
Yeah, the last referendum, we got debt service aid as opposed to grant funding, so that doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, getting back to the agenda. Public participation, we don't have any, do we, Scott? Good man. I would entertain a motion for the consent resolutions.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Section K, which is all the whereases and whereases and whereases pertaining to a submission of the tentative budget and the figures that have just been reviewed. And again, these are tentative, and we have until April 28th to do it. Any questions? Roll call? Yes, Mr. O'Brien?
Oh, after
Okay, may we have a roll call on this consent agenda, Mrs. Lund?
Dr. Cordolino?
Yes.
Mr. Daughtry?
Yes.
Mrs. Phantom?
Yes.
Dr. Modrak?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien? Mr. Rappaport?
Yes.
Ms. Zuckerman? Yes. Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Grau?
Yes. Section O. Closed meeting we don't have. Section Q, old business, Mike, or is it new business?
It's just a comment about the,
Oh, okay.
those of us that were on the committee had a chance to ask a lot of questions, learn a lot of things. Just think about things that parents, you know, concerned if the bus comes to pick up my kid, is their lunch, are they safe? Did they get their textbook and all that stuff? We all back to the business. Just want to compliment your team and you as the head coach of the team and the job that they do to make it all fit together. We think it's really a tremendous job, tremendous effort on the part of the officers to make this really great experience.
Thank you, Mike. Anything else before we adjourn? Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second? Second, Michelle. All in favor?